We've taken the relatively new rule, or the biggest rule change in quite a while, to allow the last 5 meters or 5 yards, depending on the venue, of backstroke to be underwater. And
let's talk about the backstroke finish with Coach Steve Friederang.
And because I've been working on underwaters pretty passionately with some of the swimmers I'm working with, you probably know, but just in case somebody else watches this, I'm working with swimmers from about 40 teams in different parts of the world, mostly in our area in Southern California, who come into at this moment, most of the time, to a health club, and we borrow their water, and then we take one lane of the 3 lanes often. And some pretty crazy things have been happening in those lanes where people go really, really fast. I mean, it's not yet world class, but very close. One of our swimmers just signed a full scholarship with Ohio State University, and we have a couple other swimmers top 5 in the nation. One that flies in from Dallas, who's top 2 in the nation, et cetera, that are doing stroke work with me. But it's stroke work. I'm a biomechanist, but they're working. I mean, we're putting them under some fire so that they can see how they're doing. We film them from the side underwater, from the front underwater, sometimes underneath underwater. Sometimes I get in, and we have, you may or may not know, a $40,000 worth of a weight room. You know for sure, I know, $40,000 weight room, and we're making some adaptations there too. But the number one thing that's kind of, I won't say revolutionary, but I've sent to all of my swimmers that are doing this the exact wording of the rule that allows for your head. Once your head, any part of your head reaches 5 meters out from the wall, that you can then resubmerge and go underwater and finish dolphin on your back. But at first, I looked at it and I thought, this is a great challenge for me as a biomechanist. a couple of years ago, because, people are faster underwater, and I only let the people use it in races who are faster 25 yards, because we're in short course season now, yards in America, 25 yards dolphin kick, as they are than they could swim. They literally have to be faster than they can swim. And we're improving their swimming a lot, but at the same time, it's a challenge for me and for them to improve their dolphin kick substantially. And not everybody will ever be able to do that, right? So not everybody should be using this finish either. If you're mostly upper body and your backstroke, you should just swim into the wall and maybe make that little dive at the end. But that's all people have been doing, is just diving at the end. I believe, and somebody who knows more about the rule changes and how they're done, but can tell me better. But I believe the reason they did it was hard for the refs to be able to tell, all the rules said was some part of your body had to be, breaking the surface. So people would take that to its nth, and just the toenail would be up while they reached for the wall. And I think the refs just said, let's just fix this and let people go under, at 5 meters out. But we looked at that in the last couple of weeks and been playing with it a lot. And the swimmers and I have collaborated. Remember, they're from different teams. They have different, but most of them are pretty athletic. So we had one of our swimmers who's a pretty good backstroker say, well, first of all, the biggest problem was I couldn't figure out on a velocity basis how you could get away with you're swimming along, you're flying along backstroke, and now you basically stop while the other arm comes up when nothing's going on into streamline and then dive under. And that difference in velocity was crazy. There was just no way to make it happen. But one of my swimmers who comes in, flies in, people come in all over the place, which, is kind of heady in a way, but it's also a big responsibility for me. This guy comes from Kansas, and he's one of the top, I don't know, five swimmers in the country in his age group, 13, 14, for the 200 back. But he was goofing around, and he's a fun guy anyway. We took him to Serbia to that meet, that ISCA meet. He one time just threw his arm back and just dolphin kicked into the wall. And I went, that's not a bad idea. Let's just put one arm up and dive into the wall. And I see that Ferris Casbetti actually put something online to show this. I hadn't seen it, but I looked it up the other day to see if I'm the only crazy guy working on this thing. And he showed that as a possibility. So I'm like, okay, I didn't make that up. But we have done some other things to make it even better. Like the last stroke has to actually be a stride that throws you into underwater. Because if you just lay it and then try to dive, it's just too slow. But here's the funny thing is, referees are still going to have a problem because we're now starting to dive underwater before 5 meters out. As long as some part of the body's above the water, they're still within the rule. So we're diving down, the toe is still up because that first dolphin kick isn't connected to the water. It's not underneath enough. So when they throw it down, they're still pushing on the water. So they're still moving forward, backward, forward. But they're submerging. And so by the time the head crosses the 5 meter mark or 5 yard mark in yards, and by the way, that's a differentiation the way the NCAA saw it. It has to be 5 yards because the flags are 5 yards in yards and the flags are 5 meters in meters. So we're just using the flags and then we're diving down underneath and dolphin kicking to the wall. That changes short course from being 65% underwater legally. That doesn't mean that everybody can do it, but let's say they can, the Marchands of the world can, to about 70% can be underwater. So we've learned, we had a relatively faster swimmer than the first one we did this with, do it on Saturday. And he goes to a kind of a big meet around here, Kevin Perry Invitational around here on this next weekend. And he's actually going to use it because we were timing him. And what we learned is that he is only going to take 4 strokes on the last lap. He's going to make the turn, go 15 meters, come up, take a big breath, 4 strokes is the last lap, because you're already tired. But his arms are going to be tired, but his legs, he hasn't been. Oh, of course, if he does it 15 meters the whole way, he's not probably going to. He's probably going to come up where he normally comes up, swim the race, and then the last lap, he's going to do this thing where he goes 15 meters under, up, 4 strokes, down, right? So and then begins to go down a little bit early, and then dolphins like a maniac all the way to the finish. So that's interesting enough. And Mark, I have some video of us training this. So here's what makes it a little more interesting for a guy that actually has to make it happen. Because it's one thing to do it, but this isn't ballet, right? They've got to do it when they're tired. So our set this morning was, and I've done this with 3 swimmers and they've accomplished it, we're making stuff up as we go along, but we're progressively getting better. We've been doing things already, by the way, like for freestyle, over, under. So you go over a lap, under a lap. And when we first started, they don't have to swim very fast on the first lap, and they should breathe a lot. They make the turn and they dolphin kick all the way the rest of the way. But now we've started to do that for time. And our fastest guy so far has gone 25.5. He's only I think he's 15 years old from, I'll just say SoCal Aquatics. You don't know who he is. And people, the coaches there, I think, are pretty friendly about having outside coaches. On some teams, they'll kick him off the team, which is beyond my comprehension. But anyway, just for getting outside stroking. But anyway, he went 12.2 and 12.2 or something. I'm sorry, 12.7 and 12.7, something like that. And he hadn't been training it much. He's just tough. He's a sprinter, really good dolphin kicker. We didn't know he was that good. And then we said, this wasn't even for backstroke. I haven't seen him since we got this done for freestyle. But we've been doing that. And so then we started setting records. How many over-unders can you do before you have to stop? And we had a guy, the guy that got the scholarship the other day, he's a distance swimmer and a breaststroker. Mom was the American record holder in the 200 breast. So he's got some talent, but underwater, he's terrible. And but anyway, we did it anyway. And he did 6 laps over under. He took it really easy. He's 6'5". So coming off the wall, short course. But he's terrible. He's terrible underwaters. In the 500, he's still almost state champion, but still could, we hate his underwaters. And even his pushes off the wall. So we're making it a lot better. We have him for a year and a half, even though he just signed. So that's another story. But he went 6 times. We had another guy who just dropped 42 seconds yesterday, day for yesterday in the 400 IM, and 8 seconds in the 200 fly. He's already 15. So, it's not like he's a beginner, but that's a lot to drop, in this early in the season. And I think this is probably part of it. He went 12 laps over under, and, he was, pretty cruising the over part freestyle. Now, yesterday we flipped him over on his back. He's not a backstroker, but his IM's improving, and it's because of breast and back. So we've improved the middle of events. He's a very good flyer, can swim fly all day. And he could be a really, really good flyer. So, I think you're going to actually hear his name. We think he's that good, but right now he's like barely making sectionals. So it's not like a great swimmer yet. But anyway, he loves it. And I love watching him do it because, for one thing, it's focusing him on really needing a great dolphin kick. So even if he's not going to do it in backstroke, if we train him this way, it's really going to be good. So then the next thing we did was we started timing over unders. And then now, since they've been doing that, they think they died and went to heaven when I say, I only want you to go 15 meters and then come up, take some breaths, go back down and dolphin some more, right? And it's only for one lap. So it's pretty cool. It's we know that it should have changed the whole sport, but it didn't, because I think basically because mechanically I couldn't either figure out how you're gonna make up for that time that you're going back up into streamline and then trying to get underwater. Even if you're faster underwater, the velocity change from backstroke to that diving underwater was just too great. We think we've really got it. One other thing we found is, and this is something I didn't do, it's collaboration with these swimmers. When you go one-on-one, you get to ask a lot of questions and they get to contribute. So I really like that part of what we call the triangle, where the left side is your team. It helps you with a lot of things, no doubt. Then the bottom is your mentor, Da Vinci. We always bring up Da Vinci and the second Mona Lisa. Somebody was learning from Da Vinci, right? So that's your mentor, your top. You try to find a really good mentor. I think every team should have one, and they shouldn't always be me. I'm not saying that, but you should have somebody who's really, really good at this stuff for the one-on-one sort of stuff. And then there's the hypotenuse. So this is a perfect example. The guy that's going to use it at the Kevin Perry meet, this backstroke finish, got in on Sunday after his Saturday lesson on his own at his health club, because he has to belong. So he gets in his health club and worked on it on his own. And that's the hypotenuse. How many times do our swimmers just get in and just spend a half an hour working on something that they know they need to work on, or something new like this, and just have a lot of fun with that. And most of us that are really good at stuff, it's what we do. It's like I started the magazine, you start a lot of different things. The greatest Schubert does a lot of things that are creative. You don't even know he's done them. You look at David Marsh. Oh my gosh, the underwater, the Lochte rule, where he flipped turns and came off on his back dolphin kicking and then went to freestyle. They actually had to make a rule, and David said that's one of the many times that they've made a rule against something I helped create. But it kept David fresh, and he's still fresh at his age in coaching. I think swimmers need to do that too. We need to give them the ability to do that. And by give them, I mean, sometimes we're paying for water and there's no time. But when there is time and they can go to a club and work on their own, I think we ought to really encourage that. One of my swimmers is a pretty good backstroker. He said, why don't I just go into crossover position? Because the problem is, when you're streamline and you're locking that streamline, you got a hand, a hand around the hand, hand around the hand, and you're locking it up. But really, if you take one away, this is a pretty good streamline. If you keep your hand, your arm connected to your ear. If you do this, water's getting in and slowing you down, right? So it's going to take a lot of practice. But what he said is, why don't we just go in the position we are when we do a crossover back to breast turn? So he put this, and I'm looking at him. I'm like, that's perfectly legal. You're kind of on your side, but you're not all the way on your side. And as long as you don't go too far, that's legal. So he's got his head buried, his head buried in his arm. And he's nailing his dolphin kick, and he's a little more on his side, but he's not all the way on his side. So the refs are still going to have a little bit of a challenge. If someone goes all the way to their side, that's illegal, that's disqualified. Or if they get completely submerged before any part of their head gets to the 5 meter mark or the 5 yard mark, they're going to have to watch for that too. I do think this is easier to ref, though. I really do. It's not crazy. If somebody gets completely to their side, it's going to be pretty obvious, I think, but they're going to have to look for it. But
you do swim on top, go underwater by 25, and then you're doing
No, I'm sorry. Say that again. By 25.
So you call them over unders. So they're swimming.
Oh, yeah, you mean
for
training?
water.
For training, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So, but one kid's going to do it for 300 yards or 350 yards or whatever. They're just doing it over and over again.
Yep.
Are you worried about the breath holding things or the hypoxic part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons we do it one-on-one. I wouldn't necessarily say a whole team unless you're very confident and you've got a staff and you're watching. I think one of the reasons people aren't good at underwater is that concern. But here's what we learned. All you do is you go get a $10 oximeter that goes on your finger. You try to keep it dry while they're doing this, and they come to the sun. We use this a lot. We use it when I'm very concerned about it. What's funny is when we did that with the guy that did 12, I can watch him and kind of go. Now remember, I'm walking with him, I'm watching him. So actually his mom comes in sometimes. She used to be a ballerina and stuff. Sometimes she'll watch. But when I think we're really pushing it, like if we start to do 2 or we start to do, whatever, if we do, even when we go, we put tubes down. So they go down, we go at 15 meters. And sometimes we'll go at 200 something and they have to go to the tube and come up. So at the end of that, I'll have them do an oximeter. And if they're below 98%, we'll wait till they get at 98%. And if it seems like it's taking a long time, we'll take a look at that. And what I do then, and this is where being organized is important, is I'll look back and say, how often have they been doing this? And are they not recovering day to day or something, something like that? Did you do a lot of breath holding yesterday? I'll ask them, I don't even ask that. I'll say, what did you do yesterday? And they'll tell me if they've done a lot of breath holding, but it's not cumulative. It's not usually a problem. If you can get them, I mean, it's funny because we happen to have somebody, we're in a public pool. So some of the people that come in there are pretty interesting. There's a guy there that his record is 5.5 minutes of free diving, and the record is 17 minutes. So, but again, he'll say, yeah, I started with, half a lap, or I started with 15 seconds, and then I progressively improved. And this is a smart guy. Now there's some dummies out there, but our swimmers won't be dummies. And they're programmed to tell me, hey, I'm getting a little lightheaded, or, come up if you have to come up. But if you do it progressively, this is really not as hard as it sounds. And here's another thing I tell them is, if you don't like holding your breath, the solution is to be faster. And then I sort of laugh, and they sort of laugh with me. And I'm like, so we want to keep that ankle flexibility improving. And I bring a protractor with me to every practice when it's off base. And of course, in our gym, we have one pounded to the wall. And we tell all coaches, have a protractor there. Build the modality of having the back of your leg on the ground, point your toe, and let's see how close you are to 180. And in Lockheed's case, you have to put him up on a 2x4 because he goes all the way down below that to 180. And then even with Lockheed, if you gain a quarter of an inch, just a quarter of an inch, every 4 kicks is an inch. Oh, come on, man. You win by an inch. Win by an inch, you won, And so that's just an inch for 4 kicks. So ankle flexibility becomes really, really critical. And then hip extension ability, which is not something we have in normal everyday life. So we also work on a lot of things on extending the hip with the leg straight, because most people, when they're too weak, will bend their leg on the extension, dragging water. So people say the down kick is as important as the up kick in backstroke and reverse. It is if you do it right. It isn't if you do it wrong. In fact, often you'll find a backstroker who tries to kick harder will actually be slower. When they try to take off, we'll find that as a biomech, I look for that. As they go faster and we film them on the side, it looks like their leg is actually starting to churn more, like they're bicycling more, and we have to fix that. So those things, as we fix them and as we see shifts in those lines of best fit, we start saying, hey, you're the kind of person that can train more underwater, to your point, and you're the kind of person that can race more under the water, is what we're really after. Yep.
Yeah, I think that's fabulous to cover that safety groundwork. And I also think that doing 25 underwater is, a feat for a 10-year-old perhaps, but our kids got to be able to do that, right? You're underwater for 10, 11, 12 seconds. That's not like you're underwater for 45 seconds doing a 25. So that's really important distinction, and that's great. Okay, so last then, a new question. Hip extension. So how are you improving that? And what does that mean more in layman's terms?
We do other things. So simple things really, where I'll stand at the end of the lane. They'll put their waist on the pool deck, like they're halfway in and halfway out. They'll grab my feet, or they'll grab my ankles, and they'll lift their legs out of the water, right? So they're on their stomach and they'll lift their legs out of the water, and we'll do some reps of that. That's called reverse hyperextension. And we have a reverse hyperextension machine here in our swim gym. So we do it that way. That's one way. There's a ton of other things we're seeing people do. So there's a video of Sjostrom with a barbell with it looks like 45s on the ends. Their shoulders on the bench and doing hip extensions, right? So where she's doing hip thrusts. Those aren't extensions, but they are in a sense, because you're extending down. So you're actually working on your glutes. And I do those as part of my workout that is completely separate from swimming. And my glutes will sometimes I literally will stand up and grab my butt. I'm so on fire. So we do that. Then there's this rolling thing we use on the ground where we put our ankles in this rolling thing and we do reverse on that. And we do that with 1 foot and 2 feet. We'll add weight to the waist. I just did that this morning, in fact, as part of my workout, hip extensions that way. But to measure it, we stand and put an ankle strap on us. We'll grab onto something for stability sometimes not. And we'll pull weights. Usually we don't use weights, we use isokinetics, but you could use weights where you put a pulley away from the wall. Sometimes you'll stand up on something so your leg will be free to be able to pull back, and you'll pull back. And what I look for as a biomechanist is I stand on the side to see if they've gone to their hamstrings. And if they've gone to their biceps femoris, which is stronger, we tell them not to, because although the biceps femoris need to be strong, but not for this part of the kick. If they bend their leg on their recovery phase, they will put the brakes on. So even Phelps put the brakes on there. When you watch him carefully on his dolphin kick underwater for his 200 fly, there were brakes there that Marshawn has a little bit less. And it's, again, we're talking about if it's a quarter inch less, man, it's worth it, and so we're looking very carefully at that. But as we see more and more strength there, then we expect more and more strength in the water. But strength alone won't do it, because you got to do a lot of dolphin kicks to go 70% underwater for backstroke, 65% short course for free and fly. We also don't want to see them bending and dolphining. We want to see them come up straight and then dolphining too. And obviously they bend on all the other strokes. This swimmer went from a 29.50 fly. This weekend, she went 26 for the 50 fly, and she's 14, but is a 16 and under meet, and she beat everyone. She also dropped from 103 to a 59 fly, and yet you think, well, wait a minute, you were just talking about backstroke and you're working on backstroke. Yeah, we are, but her underwaters have really improved because of it. I think this is a village. I don't think a single coach should tell swimmers, don't go other places to get better, especially when you've got 20 or 30 people. If you have 20 people, you have 3 minutes each per hour. So that's a long-winded way to talk about what I'm working on, but it's more than just the backstroke finish.
This Heavy or Not episode with Steve Friederang is a example of a weekly meeting that we're hosting with ISCA and Heavy or Not. So if you are interested, you can subscribe, watch our calendar, and we'll send you some notifications so that you can sit in on these webinars and also ask your questions. Follow along. The weekly talks are going to occur on Wednesday, Eastern Time at 1:30 p.m. for now.